Today we celebrate the memorial of three saints: Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. We celebrate three saints on the same day because these three saints were all siblings, and they lived in a place called Bethany, not far away from Jerusalem. It looks like they all lived in the house owned by Martha. Martha and Mary, they should sound very familiar to us because they appeared only 2 Sundays ago for a Sunday Gospel. What do I want to share with you about these three siblings? And I think it's very interesting that each of these siblings show something, some aspect of the Christian life. Let's start with Mary. Mary, as you may remember, was the sibling who was sitting at the feet of our Lord, listening to his words. And she reminds us that our Christian life has a contemplative aspect to it. That means that our Christian life always begins with us listening and receiving the Lord. That's always the first step. And Mary is the symbol of the receiving and passive aspect of our Christian life. We all ought to receive and embrace the word that comes to our life. The second sibling is Martha. And Martha reminds us that there is not only a contemplative aspect to the Christian life, but also an active aspect. Remember that Martha was the one who was busy serving the Lord the day that they hosted him in their house in Bethany. This is a reminder that our Christian life is not only about listening and receiving, but also acting accordingly to what we have listened, being active in serving others. So it's not enough to say, I pray a lot or I read a lot about the faith. Together with reading and receiving, we have to respond with our actions. Especially, I would point out, Martha is a reminder of the importance of acts of mercy, corporal and spiritual. And what about the third one to finish? What about Lazarus? What is it that he reminds us of? Lazarus, according to the gospel and other sources beyond the gospel, tells us that he had a very fragile health. In fact, Lazarus is the one that Jesus brought back from the dead 3 or 4 days after he had died. So Lazarus is a reminder that in our Christian life it's not only about receiving and acting, but it's also about learning how to suffer and persevering in suffering. Because in our Christian life there will always be the suffering of disease, the suffering of our own sins, the suffering of the sins around us. And Lazarus reminds us that we ought to persevere lovingly in spite of the suffering. So let me finish with this question. Where does the Lord call you to grow? Are you ought to be more like Mary? Should you receive and embrace better the word? Should you be more like Martha? Could you perhaps be more active in your service to others? Do you have spare time or talent or treasure that you should use more generously? Or perhaps should you be more like Lazarus? Are you someone who is facing disease, suffering in any of its forms, and perhaps are feeling discouraged out of this suffering? So today, brothers and sisters, let us turn to Mary, Martha,